You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
I'm Stephen Cabral, and right now, I'm about to share with you what I consider some breaking news. It's not often that I look at research studies and I say, wow, this is really something conclusive. This is really something that I can share with our community and show them specifically that all of these things that we call disease are really imbalances within the body, and that the body is crying out for certain types of food and nutrition, and when it doesn't get it, when it gets the opposite of that, then things start to become imbalanced, and we now calculate that as disease. In this show, we're looking at pre-diabetes, and we're looking at all the effects of diabetes and inflammation and the repercussions on wellness, but also weight loss as well. So people are always asking, like, what's the number one thing I need to do to lose weight? And I typically say, you need to start to control hormones. And one of those hormones that I like to talk about is insulin, and I like to talk about blood sugar. And I say, if you can't control that, if you can't control keeping your blood sugar within a certain parameter, it's going to be very, very difficult to ever tap into body fat, because your body is just going to use sugar as a fuel, and also the cell membrane, the dynamics aren't working properly, that you're not able to shuttle sugar out of your bloodstream and then back into your cells. So I want to get right into the study, and the reason why I say this and the reason why I believe that this is so important is that this came out from the British Medical Journal, and the study actually came out right around end of 2016. So this is just about 8 weeks ago. And although I've seen many studies like this before, this was really in depth. And so what we're looking at right now is they put people on two different diets. They call them a high protein diet and a high carbohydrate diet. So I want to give you the actual foods that these people ate in case you want to pass this on to someone who needs it, or feel free to obviously use it yourself. But the high protein diet was comprised of about 30% protein, 40% carbs, and about 30% fat. So when you look at that, it's not too far off from like the zone diet or one of those specifically. And then if you look at the high carb diet, you're looking at 15% protein, 55% carbohydrates, and 30% fat. That's more like the registered dietitian RDA type thing that we talk about for the United States. So what we looked at here was that each of these subjects in this study ate about 1,800 calories per day. But it's very, very interesting because this should be taken into consideration. That's more than 500 calories less than they were eating on a daily basis. So now they're taking in less calories, but they're also changing their macronutrients, which are the percentage of protein, carbs, and fats. So we do have to take that into consideration. The study didn't talk about that as much. The other thing is these people had an average hemoglobin A1C, just a measure of blood sugar basically, of 6. And really in functional medicine, we want that at 5.5 or below. So that's what we're looking at. And this study was done over 200 people, I believe. And what it did though was the foods that were included were meat and fish, vegetables, nuts, whole grains, fruits, legumes, and believe it or not, they use margarine, which is obviously completely insane since they're still feeding people what is essentially plastic. But anyway, it's lean meats and fish, vegetables, nuts, whole grains, fruits, and legumes. So if you're thinking in the back of your mind, oh, I've heard this before on a previous podcast, that's essentially a Mediterranean diet. What have I said before on previous podcasts? That a Mediterranean diet reduces inflammation. Blood sugar is also an inflammation-based issue. So not only would they getting the benefits of dropping their calories down to 1,800 calories per day, now they're on an anti-inflammatory diet. So that's why, even though I'm going to tell you which group did better, both groups actually dropped their blood sugar levels to remarkable levels, and they both did great. So just, end of study, how we look at this, both of their LDLs dropped, so their so-called bad cholesterol both dropped on both of those. Their triglycerides went down. The hemoglobin A1C, both of those went down from baseline. Both of them lost body fat. I mean, really remarkable stuff. And believe it or not, the percentage of weight loss was actually higher in the high carb group. But the overall better statistics came from the group that had higher protein and lower carbohydrates. Now, the carbohydrates weren't low, though. I want to make note of that because we're not talking about completely eliminating carbohydrates completely. The high protein group still had 180 grams of carbohydrates per day, which would be a lot. That's a lot of carbohydrates. That made up 40% of their diet. And they had about 135 grams of protein, which would be on the higher side as well. Now, the high carb group, they had 247 grams of carbs and about 67 grams of protein. In my opinion, I would have loved to see the in-between group. Now, again, both groups did great, but so what can we take away from this? Like, what's the big takeaway right now? Well, for most people, and I completely agree, that having your carbohydrates really above 150, above 180, which it is in this study, is not a good idea until you re-regulate blood sugar, and then you can increase your carbohydrates. There's a very specific reason why on all of my plans, the carbohydrates for, we're talking about weight loss, we're talking about inflammatory-based issues. I take the carbohydrates down to mainly vegetables. And I take them down, and there's obviously good quality, maybe some legumes in there. Depends on the person, depends on lectin sensitivity. But what I'm doing is their carbohydrates are basically below 150 grams per day. I mean, that's low carb, yes, but it's not like starvation low carb, meaning that you could still have 30 grams of carbs at breakfast, you could have 30 grams of carbs at lunch, you could have 30 grams of carbs at dinner, and that's 90 grams of carbs for the day. That's still half of what they had for their high protein group. And believe it or not, like that works every single time in my practice to help to re-regulate blood sugar levels. So when you're told that you can't balance your pre-diabetes or even type 2 diabetes with diet and exercise alone, you're just simply not following the right exercise plan. You're probably working out too hard. You're not able to, again, pull that sugar back into your cells rather than create more sugar need because of your high intensity, crazy, insane boot camp, whatever it might be. And again, I'm kind of like half joking because I love exercise and I love all exercise. I just want to make sure you're not overdoing it. That's all. And then also, you are most likely eating processed foods. What did this diet eliminate? It eliminated processed foods. All of these people were most likely around 2,500 calories or more, predominantly from processed food. So no matter what diet they followed, again, they had to take their carbs down. Those other people probably eating 400 grams of carbs per day. And they had to increase their intake of high fiber from the whole grains, from the fruit, from the vegetables, from the legumes. So now the fiber is going to help bring down that blood sugar. And it's also going to help with that weight loss as well. So, what we're looking at is a 6-month study right here. Highest performing group was absolutely the high protein group, but also the group with only 15% protein but did 55% carbs still lost 11.3% of initial body weight. High protein group lost 9.8% initial body weight. So again, that was an interesting statistic that they did not expect to see. It doesn't mean you should do more carbs and less protein. It just means that you need to just drop those inflammatory processed foods. That was the biggest takeaway. The fat mass change was 3.5 pounds for the high carb group, 2.5 pounds for the high protein group. Hemoglobin A1C, again, both people dropped down from, if their range was 6, they actually went to 5.5, which is back to perfect with the high protein group. And if their range was 6, they went to 5.8 with the higher carbohydrate group. Again, so if we're talking about pre-diabetes, if we're talking about type 2 diabetes, do yourself a favor, drop your carbohydrates, even if it's coming from good fruit, good vegetables, and good whole grains. Make sure until you get your blood sugar under control, which again, this study took 6 months. I guarantee you, I'm telling you, I see it in my practice within 12 to 16 weeks. Once you do that, once you get your body better regulated, once you turn over those red blood cells, you'll most likely be able to then ramp back up your carbohydrates strategically, like fruit in the morning with your smoothie, not doing a juice, but actually doing the smoothie so you get the fiber, add in maybe some coconut oil if you'd like. You'll see, you'll figure that part out. And then after your workouts, that can again strategically be used for a time of fruit when your body's going to use that good sugar, or that could also be your favorite carbohydrates, your favorite starches could be after that workout as well. When you're more likely to reuptake that sugar at that point as well. So I'm not going to make this a long show. The takeaway is this. There should always be a takeaway, hopefully, from every show, every article that you read, any book that you really delve into, is that if you are someone who can't lose weight, If you're someone that's struggling with blood sugar, we need to take care of that first. The absolute best thing that has been shown over and over and over and over, whether it's Atkins, South Beach, Our Plan, any of these, is I don't believe in Atkins because I don't believe in the inflammatory foods that they use. I don't believe in, the high dairy in the South Beach. What I believe in is an overall healthy human diet, not just for weight loss, but to be optimally well. I always say that you can't be overweight, you can't be sick if you have a healthy body. It is physically impossible. You can't be overweight and say that you're healthy. You can't have a sickness. You can't get a cold or whatever it might be and last for like 2 weeks if you have a healthy, well-balanced body. My goal is to get people healthy. They automatically lose the weight. They automatically get well. But here's the thing. To get yourself well, you need to lose that weight as well. So what I want you to do is you have to eliminate those processed foods. You need to go on that elimination diet. You need to do the specific things that are going to get you there. Cut out the processed foods. Cut your carbohydrates down. If you're looking for one tip, cut those carbs down to at least 180 grams or below per day. It doesn't have to be below 100 grams, but somewhere between that 100 and 180, you're going to see such a significant improvement because you're going to automatically cut down the amount of sugar. And again, all carbs break down to sugar in your bloodstream. Re-regulate your body, re-regulate your hormones, and then you can bring your carbohydrates back up, because we all know that carbohydrates are enjoyable foods to eat, and I'm not going to be one to be a hypocrite and say don't eat carbs, because you should. They help to cut cortisol, they help to improve serotonin, they feed good bacteria in your gut. They're absolutely needed. We just need to make sure that the body is balanced. Some people we know can eat more carbs than others. I'll talk about that in the future and why. But right now, what I want you to do is follow what the study said. It's not the only one. I've talked about this in the past. The diet that always works the best for weight loss, the diet that always works the best for helping pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes, is to drop down those carbohydrates, have them come from predominantly vegetables. The next group would be berries, the low glycemic berries, and then after that, some sweet potatoes, things like that, some yams. So hopefully the show helped. If you know anyone suffering with weight-based issues, if you know anyone suffering with blood sugar-based issues, please do feel free to share this show with them. Take care, everyone. Thanks again for listening.
I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at stephencabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.